I recently made a video for the people who just started learning a new language and wanted to get from beginner to intermediate. This video is going to be for those who are looking to progress beyond that and go from intermediate to advanced. To go from being an intermediate to being an advanced learner, I mean to go from having a vocabulary of 200 words to having a vocabulary of 1,000. Yes, it's a big leap, but it is very doable for anyone who is willing to put in a bit of work. And for those that decide to use the methods that I'm going to describe in this video, it is also going to be fun. This video will tackle how I would go about learning these 1,000 words, as well as bonus tips for those that want to make the process even quicker. And lastly, it will cover how to start testing yourself daily to see what you should be working on in order to improve the most efficiently that you can. Now, first thing I thought that I would explain is why I wanted to take you all the way up to 1,000 words. 80% of all language use is made up of the 1,000 most common words. This means that if you manage to make it to the point where you have a working vocabulary of 1,000 words, then you're going to be able to use the language in a lot of different settings to communicate. There are still a lot of specific words that you don't know, but once you learn those specific words for any given subject, you'll be able to discuss that subject quite well or do tasks related to it pretty much without problems. Okay, so we know where we want to go, which is the point of being able to talk to speakers of your target language, right? There are 3 methods that I would use to get there, and these are scalable, so that you can keep on doing these even when you progress beyond that initial goal of 1,000 words. I do have videos made on all 3 of these methods that go into more depth on each of them, but they are a couple of years old. So I am making it a priority after I'm done with this series, of which this is part 2, to make new versions of each of these. The first method is reading books. My suggestion for the first thing you should start reading in another language is always going to be the same. I would suggest starting with a manga. If that doesn't sound like something that would interest you, then a short and easy tip is to read something that you've already read before, but wouldn't mind reading again. The next method is to watch a series. Now, obviously, you are going to have to get a lot of listening in to be able to follow conversations in your target language. And watching series is a great way to do that. That is nothing new, and I'm not expecting this to be the first time you've ever been suggested this. However, I think a lot of people make the same mistake when they start watching series. They start watching kids shows. Obviously, this is a lot simpler to follow, which means that they are more beginner friendly for new language learners, but I think this is actually a mistake. Kids shows aren't made with adult learners of a foreign language in mind. The result is often that you would end up losing focus and not want to keep studying. My suggestion is therefore to re-watch something that you watched before, but would like to watch again. If you are a language learner that don't really like to read that much, then you have my full permission to be the biggest binge watcher of shows that you've already watched and wouldn't mind watching again. But there is. You don't even have to feel bad about it, it's actually productive. Lastly, for the gamers out there, I would suggest finding a couple of games that you can play in your target language and really sink a bunch of hours into. I'm talking like 50, 100 hours, something like that. Now the games should fall into one of 2 categories in order to make them optimal for language learning. The first one is that it is a massive multiplayer game where you talk to others about the game and have to communicate with others. Sadly, most of the games that are like that mostly use English, but if you can find a community for the game in another language, then that is amazing. Some games, such as RuneScape for instance, have servers that are made for speakers of a specific language. The other category is story-heavy games, where you have to understand what is going on, or the story is so interesting that you just really want to understand. A couple of examples that come to mind are games such as Skyrim or Undertale that are massive in terms of their story. I'm actually playing through a randomized version of a Pokemon game that is really heavy on the story during my weekly streams that I do every Sunday. The game is randomized and also translated into French, which makes it incredibly confusing and therefore a bit of an extra challenge. Now, I promised you some bonus tips, and those are ones that you could start doing to start progressing even quicker than you already are. The tips are going to be varying a bit depending on what method out of the three that you like doing the most. The three that I suggested earlier. I'm not really a big fan of studying grammar, but if you are, then this is how you can use that little bit of grammar studying to speed up the process a bit more. The words that we are going to focus on the most now are the verbs. If you chose to read traditional books, then I would suggest starting to learn the past tense of verbs and how they are normally conjugated in the past tense. Actually, even before learning the present tense, which is what most people start out learning. Now, this is because almost every single book that you read, aside from the parts that include dialogue, are going to be written entirely in the past tense. This means that you are going to be able to figure out a lot more words without having to look them up while reading, just because you know how the past tense works. If you did decide to read manga, watch series, or play games, then you're going to find focusing on the present tense a lot more useful, and you should be learning the patterns for how to conjugate verbs in the present tense first. The last tip that I have for you is that if you're going to be playing online games and you also want listening practice, then I would suggest that you find someone making content in your target language. That is going to let you know how the language is actually being used a lot better than any textbook will ever teach you. And then you can use that to communicate with people in the game. If you're going to do this, do make the extra effort, however, of finding someone making content that you would actually be interested in though. Otherwise, it will become boring. Hey there, do the things in this video sound useful? Great. All of these videos are going to be available forever so that you can use them to learn whatever language that you might want. But if you need anything more specifically made for you, then simply send me either a message on Instagram or an email. That's it, back to the free learning you go. This last part of the video is going to be on how to test yourself. This is honestly optional, but testing yourself is useful in order to know what it is you actually need to work on. I frequently have my students at school, yes, I work as an actual teacher as well, take tests, but not every test that my students do are handed out. But they are still useful both to them and to the teacher. They serve to provide us with valuable feedback on what needs to be worked on. The only reason why I would like to know if my students struggle Otherwise, you're going to be looking up way too many words. Now, if holding conversations with yourself sound weird, but you still want the benefits from testing yourself, I would suggest to start writing things down. I often struggled a lot with staying focused on the task of holding a conversation with myself, and using a pen and paper would have made it that much easier to stay focused. If you also happen to be one of the people that love journaling, then this is a great way to use your hobby while studying another language. Now, I hope you find this video helpful and that you now know a bit more on how to take the next step in your language learning. As always, best of luck with your studies and Nek out.